I'm at the University of Chicago Renaissance Society talking with Hamza Walker.
How did you come to Chicago?
I came here for college, and it was 1984, and and I hadn't been here before. I just came straight with no knowledge at all. Literally landed in Hyde Park one day and had to start, entrance exams the next day. But my immediate impression was it's a very different history here
than New York,
than the East Coast, right? In terms of a different, chapter or episode in American history. So it doesn't have any of that, the colonial baggage and stuff, which I was running away from. I would have been also fine going all the way to LA, but coming here and seeing just that kind of like industrial manufacturing kind of narrative that built the city,
right.
And also that blacks had come up, the Great Migration narrative, which was not nearly at all so much a part of. It is in the East Coast sense, in some sense, but not Mississippi. I mean, it's much more Virginia or something, nearby, and it doesn't have it wasn't done with the same suddenness, I guess.
Right, and Chicago's considered the black Mecca of the North.
Yeah.
People were escaping the South to
Right.
So you do have that feeling, even as you walk around. It's a northern city, but it has a kind of a southern feel.
Yeah, exactly. Which I wasn't in the whole, modernism, right, on any number of fronts, right? So architecturally,
right.
But also at the same time, the Great Migration as part of that modernist narrative. And so those two things together, like, oh yeah, this is Mises, this is where Mies van der Rohe came and set up shop, and the big, broad, open grid, but at the same time, it was sort of like, oh wow, Muddy Waters and Mies van der Rohe,
right.
Together, not again, just together.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what really my first impression, of the city. If I were gonna give it, two personalities.
You were visiting the Renaissance Society, as you were saying.
Right.
What was your impression of contemporary art?
At first, it was, is this, what is this, and it wasn't so, I wasn't so defensive as to think it's like, surely you're joking, this is a joke on me, but I couldn't get it, and there was something about not getting it that I found more intriguing than getting it. It didn't leave. So being able to sustain curiosity, like I know what that is, how can this thing be considered a part of, this thing calls itself art, that I understand, that thing calls itself art, that I understand. The urinal, now how can this thing belong to that same classification or category of objects? Like what story or definition would allow for these things to be in the same category?
Right.
So that inherently, is a set of fundamental questions at a philosophical level, an ontological level, became something I was fascinated with, and that doesn't go away.
Right. You said that people who say that they love contemporary art are very suspicious of.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, really? It's like, and I love kittens and puppies too. And it's like, well, I'm an art lover.
But something intriguing about something that alienates
the
audience.
Right, exactly. I mean, right. How comfortable are you with your own, becoming friendly with your ignorance, in a way, and not being, so. I think that's inherent to having a kind of constructive relationship with contemporary art. So when people say they love it, I'm thinking it's like, well, a lot of this stuff is really, what it has to say about how we live. I would be, the picture, what it points to, I don't know if I'm altogether ready to embrace, the positions that it espouses.
With everything when you talk about the arts, my experience with writing, it is to share one's experiences with who you are in this world, with a dialogue with yourself, with your immediate community, and with the world.
Right, but how much, and it's interesting to me about writing and self, and the things that I find it's very, representation is a very powerful thing. And I don't think we talk about this enough in terms of not just being able to represent oneself, but then when people read, what is this kind of connection that people have to your experiences when they begin to see themselves in you?
Right.
Or you've put yourself in a position of saying things that I might not be, in fact, comfortable or willing to say, even though I agree. Mm-hmm. In other words, you're making yourself vulnerable in ways that I can't. Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm according you. That's a lot of power. And I think that when we give, when an artist willingly and wants to represent, what do we mean by that? Represent. Mm-hmm. To whom inform, and that's what I think is very powerful about Kerry James Marshall, about Kerry. And he says, no bones about it. It's like, no, my paintings are for black people, and you don't hear that a lot. I mean, just with this flat out but they're for everybody in a way. But I like the fact that he wants an audience, and the audience that he wants is people who can relate. Like, this is who I'm making these paintings for, and this is what they're about. Mm-hmm. And there's no bones about it. And in making that, I think that bond is what makes them valuable for people outside of those even to whom he's speaking. Right. So when you go
when you have that conversation, do you have that conversation with any other artists of any other culture? Is there a question about who exactly they're speaking to?
You're right, exactly. But the more powerful thing is when those artists, when you go into that room and you see, it's like, oh yeah, the singer and the audience are connected right now, and he is speaking to them, and they're responding. And and that's a very powerful, that's where the energy begins to resonate. And so it might be, it might be another culture in which that power is being generated between artist and audience. But there's something in that then the question was, the dirty word of authenticity. But why won't these words like representation and authenticity just die? Because there is still something powerful in cultural representation that if we say, it's like, it doesn't matter to me whether it's like rural Korean or something. It's like, what is it? Like, people, and I might say it's like, this is totally other to me, but it's still quite powerful. Even though it wasn't made for me per se. I recognize it as power, right? As something that's like, this is speaking to people about something. Now, then to ask, like, in what ways, and there's a way in which we can mediate it up to a universal level, and they say, oh, well, this is actually just about this, and this, and this. But its cultural specificity is still, I'm much more into that. I want some of that, as opposed to like, I don't necessarily want something that was made for me, as a tourist or a foreigner or something. Sometimes, to stretch myself.
In terms of authenticity of self. But in terms of identity and knowing that we are a lot of things, stretching one's idea of who we are, who we are in this world, that goes beyond, it is specificity. We've always looked at it in terms of specificity of place, identity, where we're from. It's a place to start from in terms of stating who we are in this world. It's not a limitation.
Right, exactly. Not at all. Right. It's usually
that's what you see then.
Right. It's usually thought of as a limitation as opposed to like, no, this is actually the entrance. This is the portal. Not this is how you actually, if you are coming from X or Y. It's like, well, what about that? you know, and you know, friends, and you say, it's like, oh yeah, wow, so you're from Russia, like, okay, I don't know, and they're like, oh man, the local political elections are da 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 da, and then we tell you about it, and you're like, you know, and you learn from them about those circumstances and situations, and it's like, okay, that, you know, getting more into the place, like the more specific people are about those things, are the things that I find fascinating.